Hello everyone, welcome to Nightmare Echo. I know most of you use this video to sleep, so relax and drift off as we begin. In the quiet hours of night, when the world sleeps, stories wait to be told. Stories of ordinary days that turned extraordinary. Of lives forever changed in moments of darkness. Tonight, through the gentle patter of rain against your window, I'll take you through 7 true stories that will leave you questioning the nature of humanity. A Disney employee who led a double life. An elderly woman betrayed by someone she trusted. A holiday celebration that turned into a national tragedy. These aren't tales conjured from imagination. Every detail, every name, every consequence is real. The rain may comfort you, but these stories will not. Are you ready? Let's begin. Story 1. Children laughed as the costumed character danced before them, bringing Disney magic to life. Parents snapped photos, preserving memories of wonder and joy. For years, Michael Scheuer was part of that magic, playing beloved characters at Disney World, creating moments families would cherish forever. But what visitors to the happiest place on earth didn't know was that Michael Scheuer was living a double life. Behind the costume and the smile was a man running from the law. A federal fugitive hiding in plain sight, among princesses and cartoon heroes. It began in 2002, when Scheuer, an accountant from New York, was indicted on charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States. Federal prosecutors alleged that Scheuer had helped create and market fraudulent tax shelters, costing the government millions in tax revenue. It wasn't a small operation, it was orchestrated deception on a massive scale. What would you do if you were facing years in federal prison? Michael Scheuer made his choice. He disappeared. On the day he was scheduled to report to prison in 2005, Scheuer simply vanished. His family was told he was going on a business trip. The court was left waiting. No one knew where he had gone. For 7 years, federal agents searched for him. 7 years of dead ends and false leads. All while Michael Scheuer reinvented himself in Orlando, Florida. He changed his appearance, used a false identity, and secured a job at Walt Disney World. The man who had once prepared tax returns for wealthy clients now entertained children, posing for photos and signing autographs. Think about that for a moment. Each day, hundreds of families would interact with him, never suspecting they were meeting a federal fugitive. Parents handed their children to him for photos. Colleagues worked alongside him, considering him a friend. In those 7 years, did he ever feel secure? Did he watch the park entrance, scanning for law enforcement? Did he jump at the sight of a suited federal agent among the tourists? Or did he begin to believe his own fiction, that he had truly escaped his past? The facade collapsed in 2012. Acting on a tip, federal agents arrived at Disney World. They didn't storm in with sirens and drawn weapons. They simply approached the character he was portraying that day and, away from public view, placed him under arrest. The Disney performer. The beloved colleague. The federal fugitive. All masks worn by the same man. When the news broke, his co-workers were stunned. The man they had known for years wasn't who they thought he was. His entire presence among them had been carefully constructed fiction. For his crimes and his escape attempt, Scheuer received an additional sentence beyond his original tax fraud charges. The man who had brought joy to countless children would now spend years in federal custody. What's most chilling about Michael Scheuer's story isn't the tax fraud or even the escape. It's how effectively one person can create an entirely new identity. It's how someone can hide their darkest secrets behind a smile and a costume. It makes you wonder about the strangers you encounter every day. Who are they, really? What might they be hiding? And as for Michael Scheuer, he traded the cheers of Disney crowds for the echoing halls of a federal penitentiary. The happiest place on earth for a cold cell. Freedom for confinement. All because he thought he could outrun his past. But as the rain washes away all things, the truth eventually surfaces. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to such extremes? To leave behind their identity and create a new one? To live every day in fear of discovery? Keep that question in mind as we move to our next story. One where a seemingly ordinary summer day turned into something that would haunt a community forever. Story 2. July 4, 2022. Highland Park, Illinois. American flags waved along the parade route as families gathered to celebrate Independence Day. Children sat on curbs, collecting candy tossed by parade participants. Parents pointed out floats and marching bands. The air filled with patriotic music, laughter, and the scent of street vendor food. It was meant to be a day of celebration. Of community. Of freedom. But at 10:14 a.m., the music and laughter were drowned out by another sound. Gunfire. In just under a minute, a gunman fired 83 rounds into the crowd from a rooftop overlooking the parade route. In those terrible seconds, 7 people lost their lives. Dozens more were wounded, some critically. That gunman was 21-year-old Robert Crimo III. The planning behind this attack was methodical. Crimo had selected his position carefully, a rooftop with clear sightlines to the parade route below. He had accessed the roof using a fire escape ladder. He'd brought a high-powered rifle and multiple magazines of ammunition. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was calculated. Prepared. Executed with terrifying precision. When the shooting stopped, Crimo fled, blending into the crowd of panicked parade-goers. He drove to Madison, Wisconsin, where he contemplated another attack before deciding against it. For hours, a massive manhunt spread across the region as families huddled in basements and closets, unsure if the danger had passed. That evening, a police officer spotted Crimo's vehicle and initiated a traffic stop. The man who had shattered so many lives that morning was taken into custody without incident. But who was Robert Crimo III? What would drive someone to open fire on families celebrating a holiday? In the days that followed, a disturbing picture emerged. Crimo had left a long digital trail of concerning content. Music videos featuring animated scenes of violence. Social media posts with troubling imagery. Online aliases obsessed with violence and mass casualty events. There had been warning signs. In 2019, police had visited his home after he threatened to kill everyone. Knives were confiscated, but no charges were filed. Despite this incident, he was later able to legally purchase firearms. The criminal justice system would eventually deliver its verdict. In November 2023, Crimo pleaded guilty to 21 counts of first-degree murder, along with dozens of counts of attempted murder and aggravated battery. The sentencing hearing in Highland Park was emotional and raw. For 2 days, survivors and family members of victims addressed the court, describing their losses and their trauma. A father spoke of his 7-year-old son, paralyzed from the waist down by a bullet intended for a parade celebration. A husband described losing his wife of 37 years in the chaos of gunfire. Parents talked about children who still couldn't sleep through the night, who jumped at loud noises, who no longer felt safe in public spaces. And throughout it all, Robert Crimo sat motionless, showing no visible emotion. When given the opportunity to speak, he offered a brief apology that many in the courtroom found hollow and insufficient. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, 7 consecutive life sentences for the 7 lives taken, plus 165 years for those he wounded. What makes the Highland Park shooting particularly haunting is how it shattered not just lives, but a sense of security in ordinary moments. A community parade. A holiday celebration. The kind of event that happens in towns across America every day. Think about the last public gathering you attended. Did you scan for exit routes? Did you consider where you might take cover if necessary? For many Americans, this new hypervigilance has become second nature. And while Robert Crimo will spend the rest of his life in prison, the impacts of his actions continue to ripple outward. Through the physical injuries of survivors. Through the mental trauma of witnesses. Through a community forever changed. Highland Park joins a growing list of American towns and cities defined by tragedy. Places where before and after are clearly delineated. Where a single day changed everything. As the rain falls tonight, communities across the country will continue their slow, painful journeys of healing and remembrance. And Highland Park remains a stark reminder of how quickly ordinary moments can turn tragic. From a community tragedy, we turn now to a different kind of fall from grace. The story of a sports hero whose personal decisions cast a shadow over his legacy. Story 3. February 10, 2022. A cold winter night in Los Angeles. A California Highway Patrol officer notices a vehicle speeding on Highway 10. The officer initiates a traffic stop. Behind the wheel is one of the most recognized faces in professional football, Adrian Peterson, former NFL MVP and one of the greatest running backs in the history of the sport. The officer notices signs of intoxication. Peterson's speech is slurred. His movements are uncoordinated. He fails a field sobriety test. He's placed under arrest for driving while intoxicated. For millions of football fans, Adrian Peterson had been a hero. A player of exceptional talent who overcame adversity to achieve greatness. But this arrest would add another complicated chapter to an already complex legacy. Let's step back and consider the journey that brought Peterson to that moment on Highway 10. Born in Palestine, Texas, Peterson's athletic gifts were evident from an early age. At the University of Oklahoma, he set records and established himself as one of the most promising talents in college football. The Minnesota Vikings selected him 7th overall in the 2007 NFL Draft. What followed was one of the most remarkable careers in NFL history. Peterson's combination of power, speed, and determination made him nearly unstoppable on the field. In 2012, just months after suffering a devastating knee injury, he rushed for 2,097 yards, just 8 yards short of breaking the NFL single-season rushing record. He was named the league's most valuable player that season, a rare honor for a running back. Off the field, Peterson's life was marked by both triumph and tragedy. In 2013, his 2-year-old son died after being assaulted by the boyfriend of the child's mother, a devastating loss for any parent. Then came 2014, when Peterson faced serious legal troubles after being indicted for child abuse. He had disciplined his 4-year-old son with a switch, leaving visible injuries. The case ignited a national conversation about corporal punishment and parental discipline. Peterson eventually pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge of reckless assault. The NFL suspended him for the remainder of the 2014 season. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed him as a father who had gone too far but was following the disciplinary methods he had experienced as a child. Others saw his actions as inexcusable abuse. Peterson's career continued, though never quite reaching the heights of his earlier years. He played for several teams after leaving Minnesota, the Saints, Cardinals, Washington, Detroit, Tennessee, and finally Seattle. Which brings us back to that night in Los Angeles in 2022. Peterson was in town for activities surrounding Super Bowl 56. He had attended a party earlier in the evening. According to reports, he admitted to consuming alcohol before getting behind the wheel. The arrest itself was relatively straightforward. Peterson was cooperative with officers. He was booked and released hours later after posting $5,000 bail. In his public statement following the arrest, Peterson acknowledged his mistake. "Last night I had a couple drinks and thought I was good to drive. After driving a short distance, I saw a patrol car and realized it would be better to pull over. I made a mistake, and I take full responsibility for it. I definitely should have used better judgment." Legal consequences followed. Peterson entered a no-contest plea to a misdemeanor charge of reckless driving with alcohol. He was sentenced to 20 hours of community service, required to participate in an alcohol education and counseling program, and placed on probation for 2 years. What makes Peterson's story particularly compelling is how it forces us to confront the complexities of human nature. Here was a man who had achieved extraordinary success through discipline, determination, and physical gift. who had overcome serious injury through sheer will and work ethic, who had endured personal tragedy. And yet, he made decisions that complicated his legacy and put others at risk. It raises uncomfortable questions about how we view public figures. Do we separate the achievement from the person? Can we admire athletic excellence while acknowledging serious personal failings? Where do we draw the line between understanding someone's background and holding them accountable for their actions? Adrian Peterson's career statistics will likely put him in the Hall of Fame someday. His impact on the field is undeniable. But his legacy will always carry the weight of his decisions off the field. As the rain falls tonight, Adrian Peterson's story reminds us that even those who reach the highest peaks of success remain fundamentally human, capable of both extraordinary achievement and profound misjudgment. From the public fall of a sports figure, we turn now to something far more disturbing. A story that challenges our most basic assumptions about trust, dignity, and respect for the deceased. Story 4. In a small Texas town, a family-owned funeral home stood as a pillar of the community for generations. Residents trusted the establishment with their most precious final responsibility, caring for their beloved departed with dignity and respect. The Morgan family had operated the funeral home for over 50 years. They were fixtures at community events, church services, and charity fundraisers. When tragedy struck a family, calling Morgan Funeral Services was often the first step in the difficult journey of saying goodbye. Robert Morgan had taken over the business from his father 15 years earlier. Soft-spoken and professional, he projected the perfect blend of compassion and efficiency that grieving families needed. He knew exactly what to say, how to guide people through difficult decisions, how to make unbearable moments slightly more bearable. "He was so kind when my mother passed," one community member would later recall. "He made everything easier during the worst time of our lives." But behind the funeral home's somber facade, behind the tasteful decor and gentle music of the viewing rooms, something unconscionable was happening. It began with an anonymous tip to local authorities. A former employee, troubled by what they had witnessed, finally gathered the courage to come forward. The allegations were almost too disturbing to believe. According to the tipster, Robert Morgan had been using the bodies entrusted to his care for unauthorized experiments. Not for any scientific purpose or medical advancement, but out of what could only be described as a twisted curiosity. Police obtained a search warrant. What they discovered inside the funeral home's preparation room would haunt them for years to come. Detailed journals described procedures performed on dozens of bodies, procedures that went far beyond standard embalming practices. Photographic evidence documented these unauthorized activities. Specialized tools, not typical for mortuary work, were found hidden in a locked cabinet. Most disturbing of all were the recordings. Morgan had apparently documented his work, narrating his processes as if creating instructional materials, though no legitimate funeral science would ever endorse what he was doing. The investigation revealed that for at least 7 years, Morgan had been secretly conducting these activities. He had specifically selected bodies of elderly individuals with few family connections, or families who had opted against viewing the deceased, situations where his tampering would be least likely to be discovered. The community reacted with horror, disgust, and profound betrayal. Families who had entrusted loved ones to Morgan's care now faced an unbearable question: had their mother, father, spouse, or grandparent been subjected to these indignities after death? In many cases, there was no way to know for certain. Many bodies had been cremated. Years had passed. The uncertainty itself became another layer of trauma for families already grieving. The legal proceedings that followed were complicated. Morgan faced multiple charges related to abuse of a corpse, fraud, and violations of funeral service regulations. His defense team argued that while his actions were undoubtedly unethical, the question of criminal liability was less clear-cut. The prosecution countered that Morgan had systematically deceived families, charging them full price for services that were not performed as promised, while violating both professional standards and basic human decency. Perhaps most telling was Morgan's own statement to investigators: "They were already dead. What did it matter what I did with them? This fundamental disconnect, this failure to recognize the dignity of the deceased and the sacred trust placed in him by grieving families, lay at the heart of his actions. Morgan was eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison, the maximum allowed under Texas law for the charges he faced. His funeral director's license was permanently revoked. The funeral home was closed, the building eventually demolished. No one wanted to operate a business in a space with such a disturbing history. But for the community, the healing process would take much longer. Some families exhumed relatives who had been handled by Morgan, seeking reburial with funeral directors they could trust. Support groups formed for those affected. The local ministerial alliance organized services of remembrance and healing. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how it violates one of our most basic cultural compacts, that those who care for our dead will do so with respect and dignity. When we lose a loved one, we are at our most vulnerable. We place tremendous trust in funeral professionals to honor our grief and care for those we've lost. Morgan's betrayal of that trust was total and profound. His case also reveals how completely someone can compartmentalize their public and private selves. To the community, Robert Morgan was compassionate, professional, and caring. Behind closed doors, he was something else entirely. It makes you wonder about the spaces you can't see. The rooms you don't enter. The moments when professionals of any kind are left alone with their responsibilities. Most honor that trust completely. But as this case shows, there are exceptions, rare, but deeply disturbing. As the rain falls tonight, families across that Texas town continue to grapple with questions that should never have to be asked, and pain that should never have been inflicted. From one betrayal of trust to another, though of a different nature. Our next story examines how vulnerable people can be exploited by those they depend on most. Story 5. Eleanor Thompson was 87 years old when she was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. A retired school teacher who had never married, Eleanor had built a comfortable life through decades of careful saving and prudent investment. Her modest home was paid off. Her retirement accounts were substantial. She had no children, but maintained close relationships with several nieces and nephews. As her condition progressed, Eleanor began to need assistance with daily tasks and financial management. Her extended family lived in different states, making regular care difficult. The solution seemed to arrive in the form of David Mercer, a 42-year-old home health aide who specialized in elder care. Mercer came highly recommended. His references were impeccable. His manner was charming and attentive. He seemed genuinely concerned with Eleanor's welfare, going above and beyond to ensure her comfort and happiness. He was like the son she never had, one neighbor would later recall. She lit up when he arrived. We all thought she was so lucky to have found him. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. Eleanor was well cared for. Her home was maintained. Her medication was managed properly. Family members who called or visited found her in good spirits. What no one realized was that David Mercer had identified Eleanor as an ideal target. Her substantial assets. Her limited family connections. Her increasing cognitive decline. All made her perfectly suited for his true purpose. It began simply enough. Mercer convinced Eleanor to add him as a signatory on her checking account, in case of emergency. Then came a power of attorney document, which he helped her complete and notarize. Eleanor, trusting and increasingly confused, signed whatever he placed before her. With these legal mechanisms in place, Mercer began his systematic exploitation. First, modest withdrawals from her accounts, $1,000 here, $2,000 there. When these went unquestioned, the amounts increased. Eleanor's investment accounts were liquidated one by one. Her home equity was accessed through a reverse mortgage. In just 14 months, Mercer transferred more than $1.7 million from Eleanor's accounts to his own. And what did he do with this ill-gotten fortune? He reinvented himself. Extensive cosmetic surgery transformed his appearance. A nose job, chin implant, liposuction, hair transplants. His teeth were completely redone with high-end veneers. He purchased designer clothing, a luxury car, and even put a down payment on a beachfront condominium. All while Eleanor's standard of living gradually declined. Her household bills fell behind. Her home began to show signs of neglect. Her medications were sometimes unfilled due to insurance issues that Mercer invented. It might have continued indefinitely if not for a chance visit from Eleanor's niece, Catherine. Living across the country, Catherine typically visited twice a year. When she arrived for her annual spring visit, she was shocked by her aunt's condition and living situation. The elegant home was now shabby and unkempt. Eleanor herself appeared thinner, less well-groomed. And when Catherine asked about finances, Eleanor became confused and distressed, saying only that, "David handles everything now." Catherine's suspicions were further aroused when Mercer seemed unusually nervous about her presence, repeatedly finding reasons why her visit should be shortened or rescheduled. When he briefly left the house, Catherine took the opportunity to search for financial documents. What she found, or rather, what she didn't find, alarmed her further. No financial statements. No checkbook. No bill receipts. Nothing to indicate how her aunt's considerable assets were being managed. Catherine contacted local authorities, who initiated an investigation. What they uncovered was staggering. Bank records showed the systematic draining of Eleanor's accounts. Security camera footage captured Mercer making large cash withdrawals using her ATM card. And most damning of all, several documents bearing Eleanor's signature were proven to be forgeries. When confronted by investigators, Mercer's carefully constructed facade crumbled. He attempted to flee but was apprehended at a regional airport, boarding a flight to a non-extradition country. In his possession were a new passport under a different name and nearly $50,000 in cash. The legal consequences were severe. Mercer was charged with multiple counts of elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. At his trial, prosecutors presented evidence of 7 previous suspected cases, other elderly clients whose finances had diminished under his care, though never to the extent of Eleanor's case. He was sentenced to 18 years in state prison in order to pay full restitution, though by then, most of Eleanor's money was gone, spent on his physical transformation and lavish lifestyle. Eleanor herself was placed in assisted living, her care now funded primarily by Medicaid since her assets had been depleted. Though her cognitive condition limited her understanding of what had happened, she often asked about David and why he no longer visited. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how it preys upon our necessary trust in caregivers. As our population ages, more families face the challenge of arranging care for elderly loved ones. We must trust others with not just physical care, but often financial management as well. David Mercer exploited that trust completely. He identified vulnerability and saw not a human being deserving of dignity and protection, but an opportunity for personal gain. Even more troubling is how his case reflects a broader pattern. Elder financial abuse is drastically underreported, with estimates suggesting that for every case that comes to light, as many as 44 go unreported. The victims are often isolated, confused, or too embarrassed to admit they've been exploited. With estimates suggesting that for every case that comes to light, as many as 44 go unreported. The victims are often isolated, confused, or too embarrassed to admit they've been exploited. And while Mercer's physical transformation might seem like an unusual detail, it reveals something important about his psychology. He didn't just want Eleanor's money, he wanted to become someone else entirely. Someone who had never committed these acts. Someone who deserved the wealth he had stolen. As the rain falls tonight, thousands of elderly individuals like Eleanor Thompson depend on caregivers and family members to protect their interests and dignity. Most receive the care and respect they deserve. But cases like Mercer's remind us of the importance of vigilance, oversight, and the consequences when trust is betrayed. From financial exploitation, we move to a case of obsession and impersonation, showing the lengths to which some will go when rejection turns to revenge. Story 6. On an ordinary Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona, Maria Gonzalez was preparing breakfast for her family when there was a sharp knock at the door. Opening it, she found herself facing a woman in what appeared to be an official uniform. The woman identified herself as Agent Jessica Ramirez of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. "Maria Gonzalez," the woman asked formally. "I have a warrant for your arrest on immigration violations." Maria was confused and frightened. Though she had become a naturalized U.S. citizen years earlier, the appearance of an ICE agent at her door triggered immediate panic. The agent showed her identification and what appeared to be official paperwork. "You need to come with me now," the agent insisted. "You can call your family from the detention center." Terrified and unsure of her rights, Maria followed the woman to an unmarked car parked outside. It was only when the agent attempted to handcuff her that Maria's instincts told her something was deeply wrong. She resisted, calling for help. A neighbor, hearing the commotion, came outside and began recording the interaction on his phone. The agent quickly returned to her vehicle and drove away. What Maria didn't know then, what would only become clear later, was that Agent Jessica Ramirez was actually Samantha Powell, the ex-girlfriend of Maria's husband, Carlos. And what had just transpired wasn't law enforcement action but a calculated act of deception and revenge. To understand what led to that moment, we need to go back 3 years. Carlos Gonzalez and Samantha Powell had dated for approximately 6 months before Carlos ended the relationship. According to later testimony, the breakup was difficult, with Samantha repeatedly attempting to reconcile despite Carlos's insistence that the relationship was over. A year after the breakup, Carlos met Maria. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married within 8 months. They settled into a happy domestic life in a Phoenix suburb, with Carlos working as an electrical engineer and Maria as a dental hygienist. For a time, it seemed Samantha had moved on. There were no contact attempts, no concerning behavior. Carlos and Maria built their life together, eventually welcoming a daughter. What they didn't realize was that Samantha had never truly accepted the end of her relationship with Carlos. From a distance, primarily through social media accounts set to public, she monitored their lives. She knew where they lived, where they worked, the routines of their daily existence. And she was planning. Investigators would later discover that Samantha's preparation was extensive and methodical. She purchased an ICE uniform from an online costume retailer. She created a fake badge using a template found on the internet. She even produced convincing-looking, official, documents on watermarked paper. Most concerning of all, she had acquired handcuffs and a replica firearm that, while not functional, was virtually indistinguishable from a service weapon. Her plan, as pieced together from evidence and her eventual confession, was to arrest Maria, drive her to a remote location, and force her to record a video stating she was returning to her home country voluntarily and abandoning her marriage. Whether Samantha truly believed this would somehow lead to a reconciliation with Carlos remains unclear. Thanks to Maria's resistance and the neighbor's video recording, the plan failed. Local police were quickly able to identify the vehicle and trace it to Samantha. When officers arrived at her apartment that afternoon, they found the uniform, badge, handcuffs, and replica weapon, along with detailed notes about Maria's schedule and movements. Samantha Powell was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including impersonating a federal officer, attempted kidnapping, and possession of forged government documents. In a plea agreement, she received a 7-year prison sentence. For Maria and Carlos, the incident left lasting trauma. Maria experienced anxiety and panic attacks, particularly when encountering any law enforcement. The family eventually relocated to another state, seeking a fresh start away from the painful memories. What makes this case particularly disturbing is the intersection of obsession, deception, and the exploitation of real fears within immigrant communities. Samantha Powell didn't just target Maria as Carlos's wife, she specifically crafted a scenario designed to maximize terror and compliance. Her impersonation of an ICE agent wasn't chosen randomly. She understood that even as a naturalized citizen, Maria might harbor deep-seated fears about immigration enforcement, fears common in many immigrant communities, regardless of legal status. She exploited those fears deliberately and callously. The case also highlights how the appearance of authority can be weaponized. Most of us are conditioned to comply with what appears to be legitimate law enforcement. We assume the uniform, the badge, the official language all represent actual authority. Samantha Powell counted on that assumption. Most disturbingly, the incident reveals the potential depths of obsession and rejection-fueled revenge. 3 years had passed since her relationship with Carlos ended. In that time, she hadn't moved on or rebuilt her life. She had festered in resentment, constructing an elaborate plan to destroy another woman's sense of security and family. As the rain falls tonight, consider how vulnerable we all are to those who might abuse the trappings of authority. How readily we might comply with someone who appears official, even when something feels wrong. And how important it is to know your rights in any encounter with apparent law enforcement, including the right to verify their identity and the legitimacy of their actions. Our final story tonight takes us to New England, where a disturbing pattern has emerged, one that has left investigators and communities searching for answers. Story 7. Along the rocky coastline of New England, in areas where dense forests meet the Atlantic Ocean, a disturbing pattern has emerged over the past 3 years. One by one, bodies have been discovered, 8 in total, each raising the same haunting question. Is there a serial killer active in the region? The first discovery came in March 2019. A hiker exploring an off-trail area in a state park in coastal Maine found human remains partially buried beneath fallen leaves and branches. The victim was later identified as Rebecca Lansing, a 27-year-old graduate student who had been reported missing 3 months earlier. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The medical examiner noted particular ligature marks consistent with a specific type of rope. 7 months passed before the second body was found, this time by a mushroom forager in New Hampshire, approximately 70 miles from the first location. The victim was 32-year-old Melissa Chen, an accountant who had disappeared while on a weekend trip to the area. Again, strangulation was the cause of death, with similar ligature marks. By the end of 2020, 2 more victims had been discovered, Sarah Walsh, 29, found in Vermont, and Jennifer Ramirez, 31, found in Massachusetts. Both had been strangled. Both bodies had been placed in wooded areas near water. Both women had been reported missing weeks before their bodies were discovered. Law enforcement agencies from 4 states formed a task force. The FBI joined the investigation. Profiles were developed. Evidence was cross-referenced. Digital footprints were examined. And still, the connections remained elusive. What linked these women? They came from different backgrounds. Different professions. Different cities. Some were married, others single. Some had children, others did not. Only gradually did subtle patterns emerge. All had been active on dating apps in the months before their disappearances. All had mentioned to friends or family meeting someone new, though details were always vague. All had disappeared on weekends. And perhaps most telling, all fit a similar physical profile, petite, with long dark hair. As 2021 progressed, the pattern continued. 3 more victims were discovered, each bearing the same characteristics as the others. Each found in wooded areas near water, across 3 different states. Each strangled with what forensic experts now believed was the same type of specialized boating rope. The most recent victim was discovered just 3 months ago, bringing the total to 8. Emily Donovan, 28, was found by a search party in Rhode Island, 6 weeks after she failed to return from what she had told roommates was a first date with someone she had met online. Law enforcement has released few details to the public, concerned that too much information might compromise the investigation. What they have shared is a timeline of disappearances and discoveries, general descriptions of where bodies were found, and warnings about dating app safety. They've also indicated that digital evidence suggests the killer may be using multiple dating profiles with different identities, carefully cultivated to appear legitimate and trustworthy. These profiles typically disappear within hours of each victim's last known activity. Communities across New England have responded with fear and vigilance. Dating app usage has reportedly declined in the region. Women are taking additional precautions when meeting new people. Community safety forums have been organized in dozens of towns. For the families of the victims, the lack of resolution brings additional pain to their grief. Parents, siblings, children left without answers. Without the closure that might come with knowing who took their loved ones and why. Law enforcement continues to follow leads, analyze evidence, and develop profiles. They believe the killer is likely a white male between 30 and 45, with knowledge of the region's geography, possibly connected to the boating or fishing industry based on the specific rope used, and almost certainly technologically sophisticated given his digital footprint management. But for now, he remains unidentified. Perhaps watching the investigation unfold. Perhaps already selecting his next victim. Behavioral analysts working with the task force suggest the killer is highly organized, detail-oriented, and likely presents as charming and non-threatening. They believe he spends considerable time planning each abduction, studying locations, creating and maintaining believable online personas, and ensuring he leaves minimal evidence. What makes this case particularly concerning, one investigator noted in a rare press statement, is the level of sophistication we're seeing. This isn't impulsive behavior. Each incident shows planning, patience, and adaptation to avoid detection. The geographical spread of the victims presents another challenge for investigators. Is the killer someone with a job that requires regional travel? A long-haul trucker? A traveling salesperson? Or is he deliberately crossing state lines to complicate jurisdictional issues and reduce the chances of authorities connecting the cases? Think about the victim's final moments. Each woman believed she was meeting someone new, perhaps someone who might become important in her life. Instead, they encountered calculated malevolence disguised as romantic interest. Did they sense something wrong in those last moments? Did they have a flash of realization before it was too late? Or did the pretense continue until the very end, the killer maintaining his facade until the moment of violence? For investigators, digital evidence has provided both clues and frustrations. Dating app records show conversations that appear normal and non-threatening. Location data places victims in the general areas where they were last seen alive. But the killer's own digital footprint seems to vanish almost completely after each encounter, suggesting someone with technical knowledge sufficient to cover his tracks. Some electronic forensics experts believe he may be using sophisticated methods to mask his identity online, virtual private networks, temporary devices purchased with cash, or even hacking techniques to create untraceable profiles. Most concerning of all is the possibility that the 8 discovered victims may not represent the full extent of the killer's actions. Given the remote locations where bodies have been found, some investigators worry that additional victims may remain undiscovered in the vast wilderness areas of New England. For women across the region, the ongoing investigation has changed daily behaviors and created a climate of heightened awareness. Dating app companies report increased usage of safety features, photo verification, location sharing with friends, and in-app emergency alerts. Local law enforcement agencies have established safe meeting locations, well-lit, camera-monitored areas where online connections can meet in person with reduced risk. Community watch programs have expanded. Self-defense classes report record enrollment. And still, fundamental questions remain. Who is this person moving among communities, selecting victims, ending lives? What drives him? Will he be caught before someone else disappears? Psychological profiles suggest the killer likely follows news coverage closely, possibly even attending vigils or memorials for his victims. He may keep trophies or mementos from each victim. He almost certainly feels a sense of superiority over both his victims and the authorities searching for him. For now, the investigation continues. Evidence is analyzed and reanalyzed. Leads are followed. Digital breadcrumbs are traced as far as possible before they disappear. And across New England, women continue to look over their shoulders, check their locks twice, and wonder if a stranger's smile conceals something monstrous. Have you ever realized how vulnerable we all are to those who deliberately project trustworthiness? How difficult it can be to detect someone whose entire presentation is carefully crafted deception. As investigators continue their work, communities wait for answers, for resolution, for the chance to breathe normally again. 8 lives cut short. 8 families shattered by loss. And somewhere, perhaps planning his next move, a killer who has so far remained a shadow, present only in the evidence left behind and the fear he has created. What would you do if you suspected someone close to you might be connected to these crimes? What small inconsistencies might suddenly take on new significance? What explanations for absences or behaviors might you begin to question? These are the thoughts that haunt communities when a predator walks among them, unidentified but increasingly defined by the pattern of his actions. 7 stories. Each a window into the darkest corners of human behavior. Each a reminder that beneath the surface of ordinary life, extraordinary darkness sometimes lurks. The Disney employee living a double life while federal agents searched for him. The Highland Park community forever changed by violence on what should have been a day of celebration. A sports hero's fall from grace. A mortician who betrayed the most fundamental trust. An elderly woman exploited by someone she depended on. A woman who weaponized fear in pursuit of obsessive revenge. And finally, communities across New England living under the shadow of an unidentified killer. These stories remind us that truth can indeed be stranger, and often more disturbing, than fiction. As the rain continues to fall outside your window tonight, perhaps you'll reflect on the thin lines that separate security from danger, trust from betrayal, life from death. Perhaps you'll consider how quickly ordinary moments can transform into extraordinary horrors. Did the story of Michael Scheuer's double life at Disney make you wonder about the strangers you encounter every day? Hit the like button. Did you find yourself checking your locks after hearing about the New England disappearances? Leave a comment telling us which case chilled you the most. Have you experienced warning signs that someone wasn't who they claimed to be? Share your story in the comments below. If you made it through all 7 cases without looking away, you're braver than most. Prove it by subscribing now and hitting the notification bell so you never miss our next collection of true crime cases. Remember, the darkness doesn't end when these stories do. It continues in the shadows around us, in the secrets people keep, in the smiles that hide true intentions. Sleep well tonight. We'll be waiting with more true stories when you're ready to return to the darkness.